and expertise on biodiversity conservation, climate change, nature-based solution, and ecological restoration. She has been a forefront of mainstreaming biodiversity into the urban planning. That is a very important area, almost neglected till very recent, but now it has come to mainstream. So, uh, workers like Dr. Mona Lisa Sen has contributed greatly in this field. Uh, she has contributed biodiversity assessment in cities, developing strategies for medicinal plant, designing tools for city biodiversity index. Her contributions are both deep and wide-reaching. Let's welcome Dr. Mona Lisa as she shares a rich insight and experience on how we can work together to build biodiversity, climate change, and urban spaces. Please, Dr. Mona Lisa Sen.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I just want to check if I'm audible.
Yeah, ma'am, you are audible.
Okay. So today I'll just talk on some aspects of urban biodiversity work that's going on in India and some of the best practices that can be taken on board by various other cities. So before I go into it, I'll just give you a brief introduction about ICLE. We are basically the global leading network of cities, and we work across the globe on issues related to sustainable urban development. ICLE South Asia, the office that I come from, is the South Asian office of ICLE, and we're known as the South Asian Secretariat. We have similar such 17 offices across the globe. I come from the South Asia office, headquartered in Delhi, and just as the name suggests, we look into the South Asian region. Well, we work towards building sustainable cities, and for doing so, we work through 5 interconnected pathways: low emission development, circular development, nature-based development, resilient development, equitable and people-centric development. So if you see, the topic of today directly falls under nature-based development, but if you see the intricacies and the way it is interconnected, it falls across all these 5 pathways that we work on. And so, like I said, we promote sustainable urban mobility by connecting leaders, accelerating actions, and providing gateways to solutions. Coming to the topic of today. What is biodiversity? This is something I guess everyone who's attending knows it very well. Basically, various forms of life form biodiversity. This is a map which I've adopted from somewhere, which just reflects the kind of biodiversity that is there across the globe. And the most dangerous species is missing here, because of which the entire problem has started, which is humans. Biodiversity, how does it help us? If one, of course, it's nice to have a lot of greens, a lot of birds, butterflies, but what is more significant about biodiversity is that it helps an ecosystem perform various services, which is termed as ecosystem services, and these are the services that help sustain life on Earth. These are divided into 4 categories: provisioning, which is basically things like food, wood, etc. Regulating, like the name suggests, purifying water, controlling temperature, controlling flooding. Cultural, again, which is more of an aesthetic, recreational, even educational purposes, and supporting things like soil formation, photosynthesis, etc. Entire life on Earth depends on all these 4 ecosystem services. And that's how biodiversity is very important, and that's where the significance of conserving biodiversity comes up. Now, what all kind of services do we get from natural ecosystems? Like I said, right from things like carbon sequestration, regulation of temperature, food, water supply, water purification, flood protection, coastal protection, erosion control, cultural, spiritual values, tourism, education, everything falls under the ambit of the ecosystem services, which is provided by healthy ecosystems. What does a healthy ecosystem have? It has a rich biodiversity, native biodiversity in it, which helps the ecosystem to perform and produce these ecosystem services. Now, coming to urban biodiversity. Traditionally, when we all think of biodiversity, we straight think of forests and rural areas. It doesn't generally strike us that biodiversity can also be in urban areas. The trees, the parks, the birds, butterflies, microorganisms, everything that is there in a city landscape comprises the urban biodiversity of the area. So it's a misnomer to say that urban areas do not harbor biodiversity. Urban areas harbor a significant amount of biodiversity, and that is how their role in conservation and protection of the same becomes very, very significant. So, why do we need to, one, measure biodiversity and also undertake biodiversity conservation efforts that cities are doing? Cities make up less than 3% of the land on the earth, but cater to more than 50% of the population on the earth, and they are the engines or areas where 75% of the resources are used. It was noted that in 2010, 50% of the global population was living in cities, and it's projected that by 2050, 70% of the global population will be living in cities. And it's also again projected that 60% of the global population increase will happen in the Asian region. This puts our cities into a great amount of focus for conserving biodiversity. Now, cities and biodiversity conservation, this is something which has been conflicting. This is not something which has gone in sync with each other. Rapid urbanization is one of the major contributors to biodiversity loss through rapid land use change, demand for resources, and this is making cities increasingly vulnerable to climate risks. This is one of the major areas why biodiversity conservation needs to happen against the backdrop of climate change. The first time when a study was undertaken to understand that biodiversity exists in cities and contributes to the quality of life was in 2010, when the Cities and Biodiversity Outlook document was developed. This was something which was developed by the Secretariat of Convention on Biological Diversity, along with ICLAI and several other partners, again, freely downloadable. And this was the first time where the linkage between urbanization, biodiversity, and ecosystem services was built in. So, amongst the 10 key messages that came out was that cities can exist in areas which harbor rich biodiversity. Biodiversity and ecosystem services are critical for the functioning of the cities. Biodiversity contributes to both climate change mitigation and adaptation. Biodiversity is very, very important for the urban food systems, and integration of the same into urban policy and planning is critical. The next step that came up for mainstreaming biodiversity conservation into urban planning was the development of a guidebook called Local Action for Biodiversity. Again, something which was developed by ICLAI in partnership with IUCN, UN Habitat, and several other partners. Again, a freely downloadable resource. This provides practitioners with a comprehensive guideline on how to mainstream biodiversity conservation at a local level. This was the first time when such an attempt was made, much before when LBSAPs were made mandate. Someone needs to.
Please mute your own self, all the people. Angita.
Coming to the legislative framework of India, urban greens were included for the first time in the forest policy, which is still a draft, in 2018. Significance given to urban greens was all the greens that are there in gardens, avenues, block plantations, etc. And they are managed as urban forest ecosystems, and management of them is critical for the development of cities. The other legislative framework that we have is the Biological Diversity Act, which puts a lot of emphasis on governance of biodiversity through the Biodiversity Management Committee and the People's Biodiversity Register. Here again, we all tend to have this misconception that a biodiversity management committee is only for a panchayat. That is not the case. As per the Biological Diversity Act of India, it is mandatory for every local body, which means a city government as well as a village panchayat, to have a biodiversity management committee, which will then develop a people's biodiversity register as its primary activity. So this is the significance which is given to urban biodiversity even through the Biological Diversity Act of India. I just said that cities have to look into biodiversity governance. To understand where a city stands today and where it lacks with regards to biodiversity governance, there is an indicator or an index, the only one which is available globally and recognized by the Convention of Secretariat of Biological Diversity. This is known as the City Biodiversity Index. And this is a tool which helps cities to evaluate and monitor their biodiversity conservation efforts. The beauty of this index is that it's a self-assessment tool and it's easy to apply, has scientific credibility, and is objective as well as fair. It's also known as the Singapore Biodiversity Index because it was proposed by Singapore and the 9th Convention of Parties of the CBD, and it was endorsed in 2010 at the 10th Conference of CBD. Led by Singapore National Parks, ICLEI, the Convention of Biological Diversity, and several other organizations were part of developing this index. The index has 3 pillars on which the performance or the existence of existing condition of a city with regards to biodiversity is gauged. The 3 pillars are native biodiversity of the city, which has 10 indicators, ecosystem services provided by the biodiversity in the city, which has 4 indicators, and governance and management of biodiversity in the city, which has 9 indicators. So if you just look at the distribution of indicators, you can understand that if a city is present in a global biodiversity hotspot, it is not necessary that they will get a high score. What is more important to see is how is the governance of biodiversity happening in the city. Several cities across the globe have applied the City Biodiversity Index. This is just a glimpse of some of them. These are the Indian cities who have applied the index, and there are several others who are in the process of applying. Hyderabad was the first city to have applied in India to have applied this index, and this index is actually supposed to be repeated every 5 years to see how the city has progressed on each of the 23 indicators. Hyderabad again is the only city in India to have repeated the index. Well, this is some of the cities who have developed this index. Then next thing, that the gaps and lacuna which are identified through the 23 indicators of the City Biodiversity Index can be addressed through planning and strategically developing an action plan. That is what a local biodiversity strategy and action plan helps with. This is also mandatory as per the Biological Diversity Act of India, and also because India is a party to the Convention of Biological Diversity. The LBSAP is basically a replica of the National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan at the local level. So basically, it's a guiding strategy with specific actions suggested for local governments to achieve optimal and realistic governance and management of biodiversity and ecosystem services. The guidelines for developing of the National Biodiversity Strategy Action Plan, state level biodiversity strategy and action plan, as well as local biodiversity strategy and action plan have recently been released by the Secretariat of Convention on Biological Diversity. Again, ICLEI was one of the partners who worked on this. These are freely downloadable guidelines, and we've been encouraging cities to follow these guidelines to develop their LBSAPs. Some of the cities in India which have developed their LBSAPs include Kochi, Gangtok, Nagpur, Rajkot, Siliguri, Udaipur, Noida, Jammu Kashmir, like Jammu, Srinagar, Indore, Bhopal, etc. Natural asset map. Cities several times while planning want to know what kind of natural asset or what kind of green spaces and blue spaces do they have and where are they present. So that is what a natural asset map does. It just places the blue-green spaces on a GIS platform for a city to understand where they stand with regard to which biological resource, or basically in the sense of an ecosystem, and then base their planning on the basis of the same. This is something which cities find very, very helpful, and several cities have been approaching us for the same. Several cities have also approached us, which I don't think I have a slide on, but is on the time series analysis of how these natural assets have changed, reduced, sometimes increased in several cities over, say, a time frame of 10 to 20 years. So it's a comparative analysis, again done on a GIS scale, for cities to be understanding where they stand. Again, someone needs to mute. Someone needs to mute, please. These natural asset maps are basically for the city governments to plan. But one of the major things that needs to be done amongst city dwellers is to make them understand about the significance of biodiversity and the biodiversity wealth that the cities have. So that's how we've been converting these natural asset maps into illustrated natural asset maps to showcase the biodiversity wealth that a city has. And this is done following some traditional art form of the city, like the Gangtok map follow the Thanka art. Kochi map has, if you see, the compass is a Kathakali dancer, so it's a traditional art form which is always built into it. And several of these maps are now displayed in these cities in public centers so that people can go and see what kind of biodiversity wealth they have and appreciate the need for conservation of the same. This is the Nagpur map. Like I said, again, Nagpur is known for oranges, so the compass is orange. Nagpur is also the tiger capital of the world, so we have a tiger there, and it just follows the local traditions. The Panaji map, this follows the Azolo tiles of the Portuguese culture, which is very, very prevalent in all the buildings in Panaji. Tree cover maps. This is something which cities have come up with a demand for in recent times, because more and more emphasis is now being given on net zero planning. To do a net zero planning, cities have to understand how much tree cover they have and what is the carbon sequestered by those trees. And then, apart from the GHG emissions, take the carbon sequestration values into consideration. So we've been doing a lot of these tree cover maps for cities, and these maps also help the cities to plan where their plantations are needed. So if you see, this is basically Hyderabad. This city will ideally not plant in the areas where it's already densely green, but it will try to look for spaces where the green is sparse or missing to be undertaking its plantations. This is the map of Vadodara. Again, similar kind of analysis. They will not try to plant in areas where they're already densely green. Apart from this is a tree cover map, some cities also want to look into tree density map. So basically, how dense is the green in each area. So it's divided into classes, and tree density maps we've been doing for several cities, including Rajkot. Again, helps them in planning. Like I said, biodiversity communication is very, very important for conservation. So this communication is with the city governments as well as the common citizens. So a lot of cities put emphasis on developing pocket handbooks, on developing comic books which relate biodiversity, nature-based solutions, and climate change. Some cities have also shown interest in developing small cards or pocket books which show the ecosystem services provided by the common trees or the common butterflies in the city. This is all helping city dwellers as well as planners appreciate the value of a biological resource that they have. This is an interpretation center which was developed, of course, by us in Kochi. This is managed by the city themselves, and this is a place where a lot of emphasis has been placed on showcasing the native ecosystems that are there in the city, and also the endemic species that the Western Ghats has, because Kochi is very, very close to the Western Ghats, which is a global biodiversity hotspot. The kind of student visitorship which we see at this is an open air nature interpretation center, and it's in a park which is managed by the city corporation. So the kind of student footfall that has increased in the interpretation center is phenomenal, and it just shows the interest levels that have increased in the city. Some of the local bodies have also been using some guidelines. So we've been coming up with very simple guidelines on how to develop local biodiversity strategy and action plans, how to develop illustrated natural asset maps, how to Miyawaki is a method which several cities are following to develop urban forests. So what are the things that a city has to keep in mind, not just for developing, even for maintenance of the same? How does a city develop an open green space, keeping ecosystem services and the demand of the community in mind? These are guidelines which cities are now actively following to make their open spaces more green. Globally, there is a platform available for cities to be reporting their work with regard to biodiversity. This is again a freely joinable platform for cities. This is also the only platform recognized by the Convention of Secretariat of Biological Diversity for cities to be reporting their biodiversity action. This is known as Cities with Nature, and this is very simple to register. It forms as a community hub, also as a knowledge and research hub. It's a little outdated slide, so more than 300 cities are there now online. So this is a platform which helps cities by providing them a lot of tools freely available, which they can use to understand, gauge their biodiversity wealth as of now, and where they stand with regards to the governance and how they can improve the same. Nature-based solutions, we all know, help both to conserve nature and societal benefits. So we always have this in mind that nature-based solutions are probably being used only in rural areas. Most of the examples also that we get with random searches come from rural areas. To break this misnomer, we did a compendium on urban case studies on nature-based solutions from India, Nepal, and Bangladesh. This follows the IUCN classification of nature-based solutions with detailed examples under each of the 5 categories from cities in India, Nepal, and Bangladesh. This is again freely downloadable for cities to be following. I'll come to a small case study, which is from a city based in India, Kochi. Kochi is probably the first city in Kerala to have both a city biodiversity index and a local biodiversity strategy and action plan. This was developed in 2019 for the city. Of course, ICLAI led the work. In the local biodiversity strategy and action plan, the city had identified 9 critical ecosystems on which the health of the city and the functioning of the city is based. One of the focus areas or critical ecosystems was agriculture. Even though agriculture is not really prevalent in the city, it's prevalent in the peri-urban areas. And city understood that there is a need to augment the pollinator diversity that is there in the city to be able to support urban agriculture. That is how the city developed a pollinator garden, which is now managed by the corporation themselves. This is again in Subhash Park, park which the corporation manages. Canals, which are actually the lifeline of Kochi, were also identified as another critical ecosystem. And these canals were earlier flowing. Now they have a lot of clogging and a lot of issues like encroachment, direct dumping of sewage. So the city has been seeing that the traditional grey solutions of dredging, etc., are not working, and they want to rejuvenate these canals. So the city is focusing on green infrastructure, on canal rejuvenation, and so the city is trying to go in for a full feasibility analysis of the same for a canal known as Pandarachi Fort. And in another canal, the city has established floating wetlands. This is the first time that floating wetlands have been put in successfully in a canal which has saline water, because these canals are connected to the backwaters. Till date, all floating wetlands which have been established in lakes and ponds are fresh water. This is the first one which is there in saline water and is running very successfully. Kochi also has been regularly putting in municipal budget to the tune of 10% of the overall budget every year to biodiversity action, which are identified in the local biodiversity strategy and action plan. So this is a short example of a city which started with no baseline data also existing and has gone on to a stage where they are regularly planning biodiversity action and building it into their municipal budget and urban planning. So this is one of the pioneering cities, an example which we always try to showcase so that other cities can follow the same. Well, the journey has just begun, and some of the pioneering cities in India are there on the map. There are globally other cities as well. I mean, of course, Rajshahi from Bangladesh is also on the list. Now, what happens if we ignore the significance of biodiversity? I don't think we need to go into the details of this, droughts, floods. Very recent case was the coronavirus, which still keeps coming back. It's not something which you've given, which science has left behind. So this just shows that we have to be able to live in harmony with nature and bring in the biodiversity conservation into urban planning as a critical step so that our cities move towards sustainable urban development. The scope for having nature-based planning in Indian cities is actually now. Why? Because by 2030, it's projected that 50% India's population will reside in urban areas. Major part of the infrastructure that we need in our cities by 2070 is yet to be built. So this is an ideal opportunity for us to think of how we want our cities. Do we want biodiversity integrated into it, or do we want to live in concrete jungles? This is the choice that we really need to make. What kind of cities are we looking at? And this is how the biodiversity, conservation, planning, everything comes very, very important. Cities play a very, very significant role in this because local action moves the world. It's the action that is taken at the city level is what gets replicated ahead. I think that was a short presentation that I had, and I'm open to questions, discussions, everything.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for such a informing presentation. I would like the platform is now open for question and answers to all the participants who joined us today. You can ask question and answers or any doubts you are having with respect to governance or the whatever the ma'am has shown the indexes. So now I leave the platform open to all the participants to ask the questions. And while going through that, ma'am, I was just having one the question over there. Number one thing, okay, people are still joining us. Anyhow, the presentation is over. Okay, so ma'am, actually, I just wanted to know the maps which you have shown, how the local biodiversity strategy action plans, the one which you showed, it is like a mini replica of the national plan. Like how it is, we can implement on a city level, and how an individual, people who are like from a masters or people who are just normal citizens, how they can participate into this kind of one actions.
So the local biodiversity strategy and action plan is not really a replica of the NBSAP, but it feeds into the NBSAP by helping attain or helping move towards attaining the 23 NBTs or national biodiversity targets that we have. The LBSAPs, which are made in the correct manner, are made in a very scientifically informed and participatory manner. That's where each one of the citizens, students, everyone has a role to play and also a duty to be coming in for all these discussions. The Kochi LBSAP that I showed you was developed over a time period of 2 years. Kochi has 74 wards. We had ward level meetings in each ward wherein anybody could join in to have discussions on what is the biodiversity that they have, what are the issues that they're facing, how were these ecosystem services earlier, what were the traditional methods of biodiversity conservation and governance that were used, which have weakened out over time. So that's how we need to bring on board all kinds of issues as well as solutions as a common citizen of any city.
Dr. Jayendra Lakmapurkar has a question. So you can ask.
Good afternoon, ma'am. My question is, when it comes to urban area, land, land resources very less or very costly, and biodiversity does require space. To how to optimize that more biodiversity is conserved, or how to convince managers that biodiversity is important in urban area, because that's a major limitation that we are facing.
Yes. So basically, see, it just begins, even we face the struggle. I'm not saying no, real estate lobby is very, very strong. It is very difficult to work in a way against them. But it's just that when you start working with a city, you have to identify your local level champions. It's through them that you can make your inroad into the city governance or the overall city bureaucracy. It's when you have these, that's what I'm saying, stakeholder discussions are very, very important. And it's very necessary that each and every one of us as a stakeholder participates in all these meetings and discussions. In Kochi, we identified a few of the, like I'm saying, champions. They were the ones who led these ward level meetings, and they were the ones who mobilized it so much that the local councillors were forced to look into these issues. And that's how the LPSAP came up. And that's how now we are at a stage where the city regularly is putting in 10% of its municipal budget into biodiversity activities. I know it's not a very simple game. Kochi took us 2 years and our full-time presence to be turning the wheel. But yes, it's a thing which we just have to work for.
Yeah, I just give you one example of Vadodara city. I'm from Vadodara. Vishwamitra is a small river which flows to the city.
Yeah.
And it was the planners were trying to make it a river front. It's a very narrow, valley. If you make it look like canal. So we are fighting for this, protesting. One thing which came to help us is the biodiversity, because it is one of the urban area where the highest number of crocodiles are.
Crocodiles, yeah.
So that is a scheduled fish species. So they could not touch the river. And now they are conserving river for to prevent waterlogging and flooding. So sometimes biodiversity itself come to the rescue.
Yes, of course. Then sometimes things like declaring it as a biodiversity heritage site or as an OECM gives it more protection, wherein then the real estate lobby cannot take over and do the land use change. So it just depends situation to situation as to how you move about it and how you are able to mobilize both the bureaucratic and political leadership of the city.
Ma'am, I would also like to ask about this thing because, cities being a development. So how the development and conservation can go hand in hand, specifically in the, I'm talking about the metro cities like Mumbai or into the Bangalore, where they are literally creating these green walls, they are creating everything. But how that conservation is relevant with respect to the biodiversity conservation, and you need to take in account with respect to development, and specifically where development is seen as a sign of progression. Because if you talk about general the mindset, the people have the mindset that if it is a village like area that we are living and dwelling in a village, the biodiversity doesn't matter. So how to tackle this issue when it comes to the mindset of a people, development and biodiversity conservation?
Yeah, so extensive awareness generation and capacity building is needed. That's what we focus on also for the municipal level, for the engineers, because none of the engineers have an ecological training or a background, not their fault. Our courses are designed that way that such a option is not there. So we have a lot of engagement activities, capacity building with the engineers, so that we are able to make them understand that the urban services like water supply, solid waste management that they're responsible for comes from the biodiversity and ecosystem services provided by the natural ecosystems that are there in the city. Once that connect starts building in their mind is when they understand the need for conservation of these resources. The other thing that is there is a lot of awareness generation, which is done with the community. Student community is one of our major target groups that we work with. That's another, if we are able to change the mindset there, that's what has replicative impact, and it moves and helps us move the momentum forward. Again, a long drawn battle takes several years to mobilize, but something which is not impossible to achieve.
I absolutely agree with you, ma'am. Because I have seen that where developmental is seen as a sign of progression. If you are living in, give a very simple example of, if the concrete roads are there, people think they are living in the cities, and any plantation is creating the machhar or the mosquitoes and the kachar house. So they simply cut it down. So this is the how to tackle this ground level issue. Of course, capacity building is there. Of course, everything is there, but how to see the results?
See,
I know.
a lot of cities are now coming up with regulations against cutting down any tree. Things are becoming difficult by the day. I'm not saying stopping is stopping it every go, but cities are now coming up with greening policies. States are coming up with greening policies where cutting trees is going to become really, really tough. The other thing is the cities like Bangalore, Chennai are understanding the wealth of these nature-based resources just because of the floods that they're seeing. Bangalore is reeling under floods right now itself. Several areas are in traffic jam. Earlier, they were not having water. Bangalore was once a city of one of the city of lakes that we had, and they were facing water crisis in summer this year itself. So a lot of the civil society, which is present in all these cities, plays a significant role in mobilizing the mindset of people to collective action. Chennai has been able to put in a lot of these ponds back into action after the Chennai floods. So we are all trying to go back to nature once we are seeing the disaster coming in.
And ma'am, yeah, with respect to the, like you have said, like there are new regulations. So are they available in the vernacular language? Are the people aware of it? Or if not, because if you, like you told me, so I am not at all aware whether these kind of things are available for my city or not. As an interest in biodiversity, probably I will just search it out and find it out. But how to pass this information to a local person, that they should be sensitized enough not to cut the whatever things are there, especially damage the biodiversity. I'm talking about the good practices also, which one should follow, and how they can access those also, because capacity building is one thing, but we a person need to access right from the fingertip. We are all used to the mobile, so what steps we can take into that action?
Yeah, so a lot of corporations are now having these apps on which you have to apply for permissions to even cut down a branch. You can't cut it down directly. Yes, it needs a lot of regulation and monitoring from the corporation authorities as well. So these tree maps and individual tree based GIS based sheets, which are now being developed by several cities, are being used to map the or monitor the condition, not the condition, the spread of the trees over each season. There are several cities, I don't want to take really names of the cities, wherein citizens have been penalized for having cut down trees without permission. So this is slowly increasing. And like I'm telling you, several states in India are working on greening policies. There are several cities who are working on greening policies, and soon all these will become compulsory. So even to cut down a branch, the citizen will have to go to the corporation with the correct wing to take permissions, even for things like the hoardings, things like parking spaces, everything. All these are now slowly coming into place.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Anybody, you can ask the questions. It's not like only we, the organizers, are allowed to ask the questions. Anybody can ask the questions, especially the students. Like you can ask, like, what are the future plans? Because we have so many students enrolled with us for this webinar. Like, what career opportunities are there? You can ask anything from Dr. Mona Lisa Singh. And if nobody is having any question, so without wasting much of time of everyone, I would request everyone please switch on the cameras for a group photograph. And if you have a question, you can definitely ask a question. And ma'am, can you share your screen where the people can contact you, where your email address has been given?
One. Yeah, this is my email address, monalisa.sen@icli.org.
You can we all can contact ma'am for her expertise by using this email address. So anyone having any questions?
Yes, ma'am. Am I audible?
Yep.
Yes, Dr. Devanshi, please.
Hello, ma'am.
Hi.
It was indeed a productive lecture, and all my students also attended. My question is, I'm staying at a city, very popular city like Bangalore, and I am a education professional. So, how to get this urban biodiversity and the changing ecological flows related to urban biodiversity in formal education?
Are you teaching in a college or where are you teaching?
Yes, diploma students I have. We also get interns from various schools. They also stay with us for 1 month. We also have some informal setup of education, that is 3 months camps.
So
So
then you
how
can,
can we?
yeah,
Sorry,
so
yes.
you can make the students do small time dissertations on what
Hmm.
is the condition of an ecosystem now and what are the benefits that the community is getting now versus what used to get, say, 10 or 20 years back. You'll get people in the community who will be able to tell you that.
Okay.
Once the students see the change, then tell them to go and sit with the people and identify the reasons. It'll come out
Oh,
very, very clearly.
okay. So this is how one dissertation topic can be given them to understand this
Yes.
uh, importance of urban biodiversity.
Yes.
Basically, my students are dealing with animal care and management. Any special theme you would like to suggest?
See, animal care and management also, I will say any city, even Bangalore, used to have a lot more livestock. It's vanishing. Why? One, yes, people are giving up their profession, but the major thing is grasslands are vanishing. So the food base is going. Why is the food base going? Because grasslands is an ecosystem which we uh, equate with wastelands. That's the
Yes.
problem. The Wasteland Atlas of India maps out a lot of grasslands. So if you start, getting students into such things of making them think and understand and talk to community, discuss, and find out why is this changing? Why was there like a lot of livestock earlier, and why is it vanishing now? Yes, education has played its role, and the people don't want to carry forward. That's one part of the story. But the major
Yes.
part of the story is grasslands are vanishing. So you need to get your students on ground and have dissertation topics, discussions, meetings, whatever is feasible in your course curriculum, and then build this on.
Thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome.
Yeah, ma'am, on that same question, I would like to know, like you just suggested that, MSc students, especially students, should be enrolled for dissertation. So what is the scope? Like, suppose they do this dissertation. So are there any further courses available, or what are the, kind of a further education they should pursue so that they can take it as a full-time career and they can make a real difference rather than,
There are
this.
several masters, even graduation courses now on sustainability, on biodiversity. Several of those courses, even I just 2 days back, I came across a course on sustainable urbanism. I don't know what that means, but there's a graduate level course in one of the universities in Delhi. So there are all such avenues now wherein a lot of these courses are focusing on sustainable development. Biodiversity forms a very critical part of it. So, and a lot of PhDs, if they want to go ahead for research, are on these lines, and this is where science is going to grow. It's not really traditional science or uh, basic zoology, botany I mean, that is very much needed because we don't really have taxonomists. That's a dying sector of scientists now. But apart from that, where opportunities are going to come is this kind of work, the sustainability and integrated development. Even the planners that are there should be learning more about biodiversity.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Any further questions? And people are saying thank you to you on our messages. You can check it out. For thank you, ma'am, for Pulkit saying thank you, ma'am, for this informative presentation. Pradyosh is also saying thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am, for lecture. Angita is saying you can check on
Excuse
all
me,
the.
ma'am.
Yeah.
Like, I have one question.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Am I audible?
Yeah.
So my question is, ma'am, like, how to manage the urban biodiversity with upcoming generation?
With upcoming? I can't hear. Upcoming what?
Upcoming generations, they like exotic pets and like exotic plants. Like even urban biodiversity have its own rule in the nature, like sparrows or some plants or like biodiversity like lakes and all things. So how to deal with these things? Like this generation nowadays, they like exotic pets and exotic overall aquarium things like tortoises, birds, or like dogs or anything like various kinds of birds. So it's been something like disturbing the urban biodiversity also, don't you think so? So how to manage these things or how to make them educated like towards the urban biodiversity?
Yeah, so it's not towards urban biodiversity, it's towards native biodiversity that you need the focus on.
It's my
So
native, sorry for that, like native biodiversity.
yes, so basically one needs to be, that's what one of the things that we've done is those ecosystem service cards, where those are all native species for which we've done those ecosystem service cards. So a lot of focus has to be on understanding the impacts of negative impacts of exotic species. And with urban biodiversity, in terms of ecosystem services, caged animals do not play an impact. They are not the ones whom we are talking of. A lot of awareness generation amongst students and the young generation needs to be done on the negative impacts of all these exotic pets that come in. The African giant snail came in along with pets. It wasn't brought in a way. There are a lot of these exotic fishes which are being released into the water because people soon get bored of these pets. Once it's released, it's creating havoc with the native fish diversity. So this is again something which a lot, even in the regular courses, needs to be spoken about, needs to be discussed. It's an extensive amount of capacity building that has to happen. The younger generation is just getting attracted by the looks of things because they're not understanding the negative impacts. The day you start working with them and telling them negative impacts, it just goes back. We've been doing this with school children, and we're seeing the replicative impacts that are happening, wherein they're not even willing to let their parents plant exotic vegetables. A long drawn battle
Thank
again,
you,
but
ma'am.
yes, has to go on.
Like any other questions? Any further questions? If not, then we will straight away head for our group photograph. I request everyone, please switch on your camera for the group photograph. Again, it's a request, please switch on your cameras for the group photograph. You all are good. Great to see all of you. Till then, we were just seeing the boxes with the names. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, everyone.
And I would request Dr. Jayendra Lakmapurkar sir to officially close the webinar.
Thank you, Mona Lisa ma'am. It was such an interesting and informative lecture. So yes, biodiversity is very important for biodiversity itself, but now with the coming of climate change, urban biodiversity is playing a very key role as the rivers sustain biodiversity, but also they act as a buffer to the flooding. Trees sustain various bird species, so much rich biodiversity in it, but they also improves microclimate. They control the temperature. So urban biodiversity is very important, and today's lecture was on it and very informative. Thank you so much. Thank you all those who attended this lecture. I hope this lesson we have learned will go a long way to convincing our neighbors, our nearby people on urban biodiversity. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone who joined us. And thank you, Melissa ma'am, for giving us this information, valuable information. This recording will be available on the YouTube channel of Gujarati Ecology Society. So you can watch it again for the insights. And I request everyone, you may please leave the meeting as the webinar has been officially closed.